Batman.
It's June 23rd, 2019, which means it is the 30th anniversary of Tim Burton's Batman, which opened in theaters June 23rd, 1989. That's math for you. I knew it was going to be the anniversary coming up, but I was like, I'm going to have to carry the 2, subtract. 30 years. This film is almost as old as I am. I'm only 33, so I was a youngster when this came out. But I am joined here today by, I think I've dubbed you this now twice, Mr. Batman, Ed Greer.
Dude, I am not Mr. Batman, but thank you so much. I'm in your bat cave right now.
That's right. If it sounds a little hollow, if it sounds like we are in a cave, we are in my man cave because Ed and I, it's actually the day. A lot of times you record these right before or right after. It is June 23rd. We watched Batman on its 30th birthday, the new 4K restoration, which means there were a couple of little minor changes here and there.
Yeah. I think broadly successful ones.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we get into this, but the reason why we wanted to do this right now, we've talked a lot about identity with pop culture, how pop culture shapes who you are as a person, and therefore sometimes people take things too seriously or take things too whatever because it's now become part of their identity, whereas I think Batman is one of those things. So I wanted to watch it so that we could come talk about everything about this movie, because whether you like this movie or not, it was a game changer.
Well, and also, I really recommend, as close as you can, if you're listening to this, to watch it. Because there are nuances that I personally, like I said, my girlfriend watches it so much that I kind of shunt it off. You know what I mean?
Right.
I've been building up a resistance to iocane powder. You know what I mean? or maybe a susceptibility to iocane powder in this respect. You know what I mean?
You got to build those antibodies.
Yeah,
you got to build those bat antibodies.
Because I haven't seen it in a long time on purpose. And wow, there's so much nuance that we're going to talk about that I think is lost on people when you're just thinking about it from your memories.
No, I don't want to assume that everybody knows all the backstories to how this movie came to be, because it was a long process. I also don't want to assume that you don't know anything about it. So I was like, how do we tackle this? How do we tackle something that's so close to me and could easily just become my weird nostalgia trip, but B, how do we cover this or talk about this in a way that we haven't been talking about for 30 years?
Well, I mean, one thing I would like to say is it wasn't the slam dunk everybody thinks it was going to be. That should to me, Batman 1989, that's my starting talking point, is in retrospect, it's of course, you do a reasonable Batman that's not Adam West, and there's reasonable danger in the script, you have some pretty good actors attached, and who are stars at the time, yeah, it's going to make money. That was a cultural shift movie. That shifted the culture in a certain way.
I think you have to talk about with this movie, anytime that we do an episode of this podcast, we always start with the context of this movie. And I think, I say this all the time. Someone's going to make a t-shirt, but I say this all the time. I think with this movie, context is so important because this movie went through so many different iterations. This movie at one point was the movie that was the worst idea going around Hollywood. And you've talked about it before on other podcasts. A gentleman that we've both had the privilege of meeting in our life, Michael Uslan.
Yes.
Who was the man who, if you guys aren't familiar, way back in the 70s, he was teaching a class in college about comics.
Yeah.
And that was a time
first in the country.
Right. People were not taking the art form, the storytelling form, the literature of comic books very seriously, but he was.
So little to the point where a guy on a professor's salary or whatever he was doing was able to buy the rights to do a film adaptation of Batman.
That's right.
He personally had the rights in his pocket, walking around with them for years trying to set this movie up. And I just want to talk about that birth, because it's after Superman had just ran it all into the ground, that seems to be your flagship property. You ran that into the ground, and now you got this guy who everybody remembers as a joke, and you're trying to do some semi-serious version of it. It seems like it was well endowed.
Now, that's the interesting part of this, because I'm sure you're hearing Michael Uslan buys the rights to the film adaptation of Batman. You're like, wait a minute. How does one man, like, how does someone just go buy the movie rights to Batman? And that's where I said this was the quote unquote worst idea in Hollywood, because they told him, they're like, look, we'll sell this to you, but Batman's dead as a doornail. Nobody wants this. It's over. So you're right. He held on to these film rights because everyone they went to said either flat out, no, we don't want to do this.
And I've done this list of idiotic rejections for it, but it's just hilarious every time. We did Robin and Maid Marian, so we can't do Batman and Robin. We think it should be Batman in space because, getting him out of that urban element would be pretty cool. Just all these different ridiculous things this dude with this brilliant product in his pocket was told. It's like telling, I know I do chicken metaphors all the time, but it's like telling Colonel Sanders, like, man, you should make steaks, dude. I mean, like, I think I'll buy your recipe and smear it on brisket. You know what I mean?
We do chicken fried steaks. But I mean, that's the thing. They either flat out said, no way, or, okay, fine, but it's got to be the wham, biff, pow, Batman. And he was like, nope, I'm not doing that. He held out.
And the thing is, long story boring, he got Jack Nicholson attached, and it still took a decade more. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah.
That's how cold it was.
That's how like, and it's impossible now to think about Batman as not just like the top, one of the top properties. I mean, you look at that logo. It's one of those things where it's like Mickey Mouse, or Pepsi. Like, people just, it's culturally ingrained in you. So yeah, this project was just lingering. It was going almost nowhere. And then they went and they took it to one of the most unlikely places, which was they took it to Peter Guber. Don't know who that is? That's because he was a record person. He was at Casablanca Records, which, by the way, Casablanca Records, they were a disco label until they got the hottest band in the world, Kiss, from Neil Bogart, and they turned it all around. So essentially it's like, why would they take the film rights to Batman to a record company? Well, at the time that they were trying to do more than just records. Now we think of these big conglomerates and it's like, yeah, they want their hand in everything.
In hindsight, it's a no-brainer.
Exactly.
That this guy should do this and they should do that. They should all be together.
Right. But to your point, this still, even once they got there, it went to Universal, it went here, it went there, finally got to John Peters at Warner Brothers. That's when they started getting traction. Pee-wee's Big Adventure had just come out, so Tim Burton was now on the radar. So Michael Uslan tells this great story about, how this all came to be, and then he's like, I finally got to a point where they were going to make my movie, and then they announced that the director of Pee-wee's Big Adventure with one of the hottest comedy stars was going to be Batman, and I just went, oh no, I held out for over 10 years, and my worst fear happened. And a lot of people's worst fear happened. Like, we talk about Batfleck, we talk about Robert Pattinson happening right now. People, I don't want the twinkling Twilight Batman.
I mean, from the beginning, though, that this whole concept, that's why I think we do need to, me even personally, I need to relax on the new breed of fans. Because fans have been somewhat toxic about like this forever. They had to mail their concerns in. And they still did at these times.
It's so funny because there were these, like, quote unquote protests about the Snyder Cut. It's like there were protests outside of Warner Brothers for Michael Keaton's casting as Batman. And that's real protest, because even back then we had not a lot to do. That's when much. That's when they cut together a trailer. And when I say a trailer, that's being very generous. They literally were like, slap together any scenes that Batman is in that we've already filmed, and we need to rush this out to theaters. No music under it, no sound effects finished. It's literally just they like took dailies and glued them together and just put coming next summer. And that was a smash hit. People were going to the movies, paying for their tickets, watching the trailer, leaving.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I really didn't know that. That's pretty funny. I think what's really cool about that is even the barest little bit of footage that Tim Burton would dribble out was really well framed and cool looking. And from the get go, the production design and all the aesthetics that you and I have been talking about off mic about that make this so different are so apparent. Like when you look at dailies, you're seeing the architecture behind the Batman. You're seeing the costume. You're seeing the actors in space. You're seeing this take. So I mean, I guess that would blow people's minds because it blew people's minds when it was a movie.
You know, it's funny to us now because we say like Batman should be this
X.
Yeah, and Batman should have been a comedic character to a whole generation that was growing up. So you had this hardcore fan base that was like, you've never done this character right. Mm-hmm. We don't trust you. And then you had another section that was like, where's the this doesn't look like fun at all.
Yeah, this doesn't look funny. You're betraying the character. I'm going to protest. I meet some other dudes. What are you protesting? He should be darker. What? No, he should commit a character. Then you start fighting in the streets.
But it was not enough, obviously, to keep anyone away because this was massive. I mean, obviously there had been blockbusters to the level of a Jaws or a Star Wars up until this point, but even those, like, you know, there's always that great story about Star Wars where they didn't know it was going to be a hit. So like the action figures, they would sell gift certificates. That's like, hey, we didn't make these yet, but when they do come, you'll be the first. Batman, they were ready. And the merchandising for this movie was off the charts. So I'm going to ask you now. There's a good chance that you're not that much older than me, that you maybe don't have even memories of this summer or this movie coming out. But I do want to ask you, do you remember at least around the first time that you were even aware of this movie or even saw this movie?
I remember this whole thing. I think a lot of kids have this memory. There's all the cool Bat gear that's all around. But for some reason, maybe your mom can't get you it. So you end up with this weird swap meet Batman t-shirt. That's my first memory.
The iron-on.
Yeah, just having this weird, like, Batman was kind of fat on it, and he had his arm out. It was almost like a knockoff of how Frank Miller draws Batman swinging with the Carrie Kelly Robin.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like a knockoff of that. So he has his arm out and almost this, frankly, fascist salute. And he's swinging with his other arm on like a rope. And his cape is kind of billowing. And he's kind of fat and chunky kind of through the night. And the city looks sort of airbrushed. And that was my first Batman shirt. And I was on a flight and somebody pointed at it and we did like a Batman gesture, like Batman. Yeah.
The fascist salute. Heil Batman.
Yeah, we're gonna join the night.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people, before we record this episode, I posted my collection of Batman stuff, a majority of it being from these first 4 films, and people are like, I didn't know you were so obsessed with these movies. But I think it's because, you know, you don't really remember a lot of things when you're a kid. I think your memory starts to really kick in at like, what, 4 or 5 maybe?
Yeah.
But you have flashes of things from earlier. And my very first memory is watching a TV commercial for this movie coming out. And it was the Joker. I guess I used to say all the time, like, where does he get those wonderful toys to my mom? Yeah. And so it's like my DNA, literally, like my earliest memory of myself begins with this movie. And I think to me, you know, like, and I was too small to watch it. But I remember there was like an inherent sense of like danger to this movie, where it was like the movie that I knew I wasn't supposed to watch because I wasn't old enough. But, you know, at the time they were still rerunning the old Adam West Batman, especially with these movies coming out. If you had anything Batman, you might as well put it on the air. Yeah. So my first love of Batman came from the Adam West show, and this was like the dangerous Batman. I remember my mom bought me the Batman, the black toy, you know, the toy with the black suit. Right. And I used to call it the Black Batman because I was like, I thought I wasn't supposed to have the Black Batman. Like, it was dangerous. Right. So the first time I saw this movie, I think I was 4. So it was a couple years later. And I had a babysitter. And she brought Batman over. And I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to watch this. But I'm not going to stop you if you're going to put it in. And I remember watching all the way up to the scene where it's now he's already turned into Joker, and he fries that guy with the hand buzzer. And it wasn't that I was scared of what I was seeing, which I was.
Right.
But I was more scared of, I was like, Mom's going to come home and she's going to see I'm watching this, and this is like the one I'm not supposed to watch. So I didn't see the film in its entirety till another year after that when it was on CBS. So, and I taped it off of TV, and it was the TV edit. So that's what I was saying when we were watching the movies. Like, there are certain points in the movies where like it's weird to my brain that it's not a commercial break here.
Right.
But I think for whatever reason, there's something about this movie. It's kind of like the Avengers. I've seen so many Marvel team up movies now that like it's just, you know, it's kind of like whatever. Yeah, there's 5 different Marvel characters. But even when I watch that first Avengers again, no matter how many times I see it, there's still that feeling of like I can remember feeling like I've never seen all these people together. And that's how I feel about Batman. Even watching it now, there's a little sense of danger. Like, I know this is like the Batman your parents don't want you to watch, you know? And that's kind of the feeling that I take with it. And I think like when people talk about this being a dark movie, like it's literally ingrained in my DNA that this is like the dark Batman that my parents were worried was too much for me, you know? Which makes it feel special.
Well, I mean, I totally get that cultural entry point. I think for me, it was like, it definitely was, I think for my generation, just slightly like after, or rather before yours, I think I was right on I was an early adopter of Batman should f people up, because I definitely had been exposed, I think by that time, to some decent, like 60s, like, or 70s Batman comics that were more hardcore, you know what I mean? That were like the late, you know, Neil Adams stuff.
Yeah.
And I had already seen, I think, dude, this is the weirdest memory I have, but like there's this weird like baby that was sort of like a seal that was born to these trailer park like freak show people, and they were having this
Returns?
no they were having this it was like a 60s adventure written by Denny O'Neil and drawn by Neil Adams, and it was like maybe like 17 pages, and like this weird freak show were having this problem out in the woods, and somehow Batman was out there and he was able to stop them from sacrificing this weird baby. And he beat up the big one. He talked to the smart one. You know, one of those adventures of Batman.
Right.
And I just remember like seeing Batman deal with like more than people robbing banks. Even as a young kid, I had already seen that. You know what I mean?
You're right.
So when I saw Batman in the movie like swooping down on fools, I really got giddy. And even that's the part I remember. My nostalgia watching it today with you was the very first time you see Batman come down in the background as almost like a horror feature character.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you see Michael Myers, but his victims do not see him.
Right.
Type shot. That's the very first introduction you have. Besides that weird, I was calling it in the moment, that Fleischer tune.
Yeah.
Thing of
the
him, like,
animated.
Yeah, of him looking over and then he turns and swoops his cape dramatically.
Basically watching the crime happen. Like, I'm
getting evidence.
I think that's why, to me, too, like, you know, I say this a lot, that I'm open to different interpretations of characters, and that's why, like, you know, with Star Wars, it's like, I don't really believe in, like, that's not my Luke Skywalker. That's not how so-and-so is supposed to act, because I grew up with the Adam West Batman, fully aware that there was a different Batman simultaneously happening that was very different, and that I wasn't supposed to watch that one. So it's like, I understand the dichotomy like pretty early. Like,
but I think this is the first, obviously the 60s Batman understood branding.
Right.
But this 1989 Batman, he's like, yo, I studied under Gordon Gekko and the dude from American Psycho, and I realized how I need to do my stuff. And he just seemed like to be a singular force of, like, you know, all this bat. This is all bat jazz. Check out my bat jazz. And I really enjoyed that from his flying stuff to his little weapons, and we talked about the bat, all of his grappling apparatus. I just think that this version of Bruce Wayne is a guy who, I think he's ultimately trying to get a reaction out of everybody. Every interaction he has with anybody is he's trying to provoke them in some way. And I think that that's his way of just being present in these times when he can't kick anybody in the neck or drop a smoke bomb or anything. I think that's how he keeps himself interested in being Bruce Wayne. If you notice the whole "let's get nuts" scene, he wants to do something as himself. I really think that's interesting. In this
I still
movie.
think that that's Michael Keaton. That's like, I want one monologue where I get to.
Yeah, I
So
bet. Yeah.
when talking about, talking about Batman, I thought, what's the best way to do it? And I think you've kind of transitioned us perfectly into, I think best way to talk about this movie and its impact is to talk about some of the people that we don't normally talk about when we talk about this. When you talk about Batman 89, the first names that come up are Michael Keaton, Tim Burton, Jack Nicholson. And that's great. And we are going to talk about them. But I think there's a handful of people that made this movie what it is that we don't talk about. And you were talking about the characterization of Bruce Wayne. Let's talk about the screenwriter, Sam Hamm.
Yep.
Because a lot of things that we now associate with this character are creations of Sam Hamm. And some of the ones that we knock this movie for were not Sam Hamm.
Yeah, let's get into it because I'm always into arbitration.
Yeah, so definitely Sam Hamm came on. There were a lot of different writers.
Right.
I think even it's funny because when Uslan was pitching this, I think he even wrote a draft himself of what he wanted to see a movie.
Right.
So it had come around, and Burton eventually, I think Burton had his then girlfriend take a stab at it, then brought in Sam Hamm, and Sam Hamm is the one who. Basically, I'd say like 85% of what's in the movie came from the Sam Hamm draft. Now, here's where it gets interesting, is that in 1988, there was a writer's strike. So while they're filming, there are definitely parts of this movie where he was not involved, and that's where Warren Scarron comes in. Warren
Two A's, right?
Warren Scarron, I think we're saying it right.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He is responsible for one of the things that I think irks people the most, which is Alfred letting Vicky Vale into the Batcave.
Wow. Yeah.
That Sam Hamm has gone on record. He's like, if it were me, that would be Alfred's last day of employment. If you just to the point where I think they even make a joke about it in Batman Returns, where he's like, "You talking about security? You're the one that let Vicky Vale walk into the Batcave. What are you talking about?"
Well, there's a whole Sam, you're fired draft.
Right. But I think what's also interesting to note, and we were talking, I said during the movie, I was like, "Did you know this?" You were talking about the third act of the movie, the whole cathedral, and you're like,
Yeah.
"This feels weird," and I was like, "I will tell you why."
Yeah.
Because that third act was not in the script. Basically, Robin, Dick Grayson, was introduced about halfway through this movie on a horse chase through a circus. And that's where now it starts to kind of fall into place. Sean Young, who was originally cast as Vicky Vale, she had to drop out because she hurt herself preparing for the horse scene, which ultimately never made it into this movie, which kind of sucks for her.
That's a bummer.
But ultimately, Joker killed Vicky Vale. And that sent Batman into a rage, and that's kind of where the climax came into. Here's where things get interesting. John Peters, and this is, by the way, is the John Peters that Kevin Smith famously talks about with the spider and Superman and all that fun stuff. John Peters and Jack Nicholson, during shooting, they're in London, they go see Phantom of the Opera. They walk out, they're like, wouldn't it be great if our movie ended in this nice big cathedral? John Peters is like, yeah, let's do it. John Peters orders a whole set built for the cathedral. Doesn't tell Tim Burton that the movie ending has changed. So then they go to film all of this. Burton's like about to pull his hair out, about to have a nervous breakdown. Jack Nicholson and Kim Basinger are walking up those stairs, and Jack famously turns to Tim Burton. He's like, where am I going? And Tim Burton's just like, I don't know, man. We haven't figured it out yet. And that's why I think this third act of this movie feels a little bit like, the movie seems like very hyper-focused. I feel like I am reading like a 70s kind of Neil Adams, or, a lot of this movie did come from the Strange Apparitions run of Batman. It feels very focused, like elements of the Laughing Fish, and like it feels like a comic book. But then that last 10 minutes, you're like, this doesn't feel quite as cohesive as everything that came before.
What's interesting about this movie is it seems like a 70s Batman comic, but in a 40s or 50s Batman aesthetic. When you look at everybody's cars, when you look at everybody's clothes, it's almost like the 30s or 40s when his parents died, and it was like the 50s now or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like it's this weird noir time, maybe some unknowable time in Gotham.
I think that works so well for the movie. Like, it works in its favor. And that leads us to another name that we should definitely talk about is Anton Furst.
Yes.
Anton Furst was the production designer. He was the guy that basically, for my money, when I think of what Gotham City is, I think of this movie. Because this movie also informed what would later come for the animated series.
Right.
He also was the one that designed the Batmobile.
And that I think that's a weird thing that shouldn't be lost, because like when you are in charge of doing environments, buildings and stuff, it isn't usually your job to come up with what the car looks like or what the gear looks like or anything like that. It's obviously production design is the whole thing,
right?
But a lot of times they'll have specific vehicle people or whatever. But like that design fits the city. The biggest best car for a spire laden city like that would be this long, weird, undersea fish.
It literally has a jet engine attached to it.
Exactly.
I
like
do
a
think,
jet fish.
I mean, it grapples to make turns because it's so big.
Yeah.
But I do think, and I don't want to crap on other interpretations of Batman, because that's not what I'm here for. And that's I actually really think that the Nolan stuff is really interesting, and vice versa. When those Nolan movies came out, it's like some fans thought it invalidated what had come before.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to do the other way around. But personally, I think that what makes Gotham City, or a lot of these comic book movies, I think what makes it like special to me is that Gotham City feels familiar in a fever dream kind of way. Like, it doesn't exist, but it feels like a dream I had, know?
It just seems like Gotham is almost like a tangled vine of a city. You know what I mean? And I think the Nolan movies acknowledge it a little bit in like the Narrows or the this or the that, these different areas that are kind of overbuilt, as Warren Ellis famously described. I think he did. So they're about like, it's almost like the dudes that designed the city were on absinthe, and they just sort of just fucked around making blind alleys and shit. It's almost like that weird house that guy used to murder everybody. You know what I mean? There's a famous, I forget the name right now, but that's a famous dude. He designed this big death house, and it had like blind alleys and different places where he would trap you in a room and kill you and shit like that. And it was this boarding house where like half the rooms are regular, but then it had all these switchbacks of weird places where he could like labyrinth-ize the place by like flying walls like a production designer and trapping you and shit. And I feel like Gotham was designed almost with that in mind. It's like it's such a place for crime and scum and villainy, because it's like, we didn't have a plan, dude. We're crazy. We're drunk.
Yeah, it's like impossible for it to exist, and yet we buy it exists because enough of it is rooted in a reality of which we buy already. Which is like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of
prideful impracticality,
right,
to the design of everything, the car, the freaking everything,
impossibly large skyline, the fascist kind of style statues.
Right.
Whereas, like, Batman in Dark Knight, I know he's running around Chicago. That looks like somewhere
Pittsburgh.
I literally have been. Whereas, like, Gotham, it's like I never could quite go there, and I feel like that's where a lot of, like, that's why this has a special feeling to me. I think it's the production design of Gotham itself married to this idea that it's like, yeah, some of the cars and the costumes look like 40s or 50s, but then here comes Batman in his Batcave with, iPads on the walls, and it's like there's a timeless element to it.
But he gets in his super jet and he uses the aiming function. He pulls out like two magnifying glasses glued together in a ViewMaster. You know what I mean? It's like,
it's definitely like, Luke, you've switched off your targeting computer. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm all right. And they completely misses, by the way. I don't understand what the point of that.
But dude, I'm telling you, we got to talk about this. This seems to be a straight up germ from the get-go of filmmaking about Batman, is showing him to be insanely incompetent for no reason. It's like a river runs through it of all these scenes of him being super incompetent, him crashing his little bike in Dark Knight 2, you know what I mean, or whatever. We don't have to talk about that. I'm just saying, like, he does a lot of little stuff where it's just like, why did you wade into it like that?
I'm not here to movie fight you. I think for me, him him in Dark Knight with the bat pod, while in my mind also equally stupid, at least makes more sense because it's like he's playing chicken, but he's also playing chicken with himself. Like, I could take him out, but I'm not going to. This one, however, it's like, what was the point of pulling out your visor with the most pinpoint accuracy and not even, like, you shot at him, you just didn't even come close to hitting him. I don't understand.
Well, I mean, okay, I don't try to motivate you, but like, to be fair, I think it was supposed to be this almost like mystic realism of like, I did target him, I killed him, but he didn't die. It's like at that moment, like Jules and Jules, yeah.
Marvin, what do you make of all this? I don't even have an opinion.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I think it's that point he's like, damn, you know what I mean? I shot a bunch of, but that's the funny thing. It's like, I tried to murder this guy remotely, and it did not work.
What a different ending to this movie would have been if it just, that was it.
Yep, that was it. I shot the hell out of this fool and I flew away.
I mean, look, yeah, I think you have to be realistic when it comes to talking about like things that are important to you, because I can definitely find reasons why these things don't really bother me. They certainly exist, and I think that's why it's like, we talked about like, this isn't a perfect movie by any stretch, but what it did was, even Superman was, when you're talking about Richard Donner's Superman, it's like half of a serious attempt at that character, but everything, to me at least, with like Lex Luthor is like still a little like goofy, and
right.
This was like a full-blooded attempt to make Batman like an adult property, which at the time would be absurd. That's like remaking The Office as like an hour drama,
Well, what was this, rated PG or PG-13?
PG-13.
Dude, this is the perfect, you're talking about the perfect application of PG-13.
Yep.
Because I'm old enough to remember PG-13 coming in as a thing that was like, yo, this is for the big kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? But having it only be 13 to be the big kids, and having you basically your parents throw some money at you to get you out of their face because you're like growing hair all over the place and you're wilding out. Go sit in the air conditioner, get the out of my face. That whole market of kids. And do people, that are our age, like how old we are right now, who are just like, yeah, finally, bro. You know what I mean? They came out like Mad Max Fury Road dudes.
Right.
Spraying their faces. Witness me, watch this movie. You know what I mean? It had that whole market. And then all the casuals who were just like, I've never seen them take this seriously before. I'll go check it out.
Right.
And then word of mouth from there. Culture equals cultural phenomenon,
which is still so funny because like you can go back and read some of the negative reviews, and you can tell that it's like, for some of them it is like criticisms of the actual movie, but some of it's like, this isn't fun, this isn't funny, like where's the they stripped all the fun out of Batman, and it's like, okay, well, we definitely live in a different era now, because I think if you were to put 60s Batman out as a product now, like if you were to come out with like a straight up comedic live action, I'm not talking Lego Batman, I'm talking if Robert Pattinson was cast to be in a comedy version of Batman, I would join the riot in the streets. Like, it just wouldn't happen that way. But it's like we've shifted, like this movie shifted the cultural perception of what Batman, quote unquote, should be.
Right. And I think it did split the difference, because like we were talking about, Anton Furst designing a world that isn't quite ours. So in that world, this guy works as far as a crime fighter. And I also think it stuck to a 40s sort of aesthetic in regards to Batman was pretty slick, but not perfect. And I think in movies, I gotta say, my previous criticisms aside, I think they do just make it painfully obvious that Batman is a person, not like some deity. And I think we as comic book readers want to see more of a bat god, more of a deity, more of an idea. They talk about him being an idea, and then they show him walking up with a cup of fucking coffee in his hand. You know what I'm saying? Talking to motherfuckers in the steno pool. Hey, what's up, bro? What's happening? Or whatever. All this normal ass weird bullshit, instead of showing him be this mystery. So I think this movie did a good job of splitting the difference of like, yeah, he's able to get shot to show you that he's bulletproof.
Yeah, look, they definitely, they make some concessions, I guess. Yes. It's like, is it the coolest thing ever that the first 10 seconds we see Batman, he doesn't even throw a punch. He just gets shot and just falls over. Like, if you ended the clip there, you'd be like, Batman's lame. Like, but I get it. You had to like it almost like it's like, trust us, like, let us play this out because it adds to the myth. Now that criminal's like, dude, I shot it. He was down and he just got right back up. Right. Like, this isn't a dude, you know?
Right.
So, like, I get it.
Oh, can we just as a quick sidebar?
Yeah.
Again, I must note that actor who plays the guy that Batman chooses to like not up that bad.
Right.
I believe now in this last interpretation, I was always wondering, like, why does he kick the out of the guy who was the most reticent to rob? Why does he kick him all the way through the door? They just kicked the worst actor out of the scene.
Right.
Basically, they kicked his ass out of the scene so that really pretty good actor could go, you're not human.
I think it's also, like, if you want to try to, like, justify it within story, it's like, clearly the other guy is, like, meek, and so he's, like, not the leader. It's like, Batman's like, I want the guy who the other guys kind of...
respect or whatever.
Yeah, no.
Respect his word to say, I, super hard guy, am quite scared now because of this bad fellow.
Which I really like. A lot of the Batman movies don't do this, and I think this is the only Batman movie that does, by necessity, where it's like this Batman is like an urban legend, you know? Because by the time Batman is Batman at the end of Batman Begins, the very next time we see him, like, people know he's real. People know he's real.
Yeah.
He shows himself. But in this movie, at least for 2/3 of it, people are like, is it even a real thing? You know, like, they're making fun of Knox.
Well, it's almost like it's like this movie, he gets down to Batman and way earlier than Batman Begins, but they both still truck in that a little bit urban legend thing. But yeah, you're right. At the end of Batman Begins, it's like no doubt that he's real. Right. And I guess at the end of this one, there's no doubt that he's real. But it's like so big.
But no one's even aware of Batman enough in Batman Begins to really like, is it real? Is it not real? This plays with the idea of the myth, where even like Bruce Wayne's like, oh, you're here for the Batman, I guess. You know, like trying to play coy, like, I don't know if I believe this. You know, like, and I think that's what's great. I think you and I have talked a lot about like, I love this idea that someone could live in Gotham their entire lives.
Yes.
And really believe that Batman is nothing more than a propaganda by the police, that they put this bat light on their roof to make you think that there's something out there.
Or an urban legend like the Killer Clown. Like, there's a southern and midwestern places where we like believe that there was a guy who was a killer clown and drove around in like an ice cream truck, but for real though, and grabbed people for real though. You know, it's all these mysteries. The Candyman. Right. And I think that was really. But again, it was like he was like, man, my press agent isn't doing a good job. I gotta start smacking fools up and dropping promos, brother. Hey, listen here, Daddy. I kicked your partner through the door so I can tell you something. These motherfuckers better watch out. You know what I mean? I'm
a real American bat, baby.
And it's so funny to cut a promo and tell this dude to tune in. Hey, same bat time, same bat channel. You know what I mean? I think that's hilarious.
I mean, and that's not how it was. That's not how it was written. It was very awkwardly written. I'm actually glad that they changed it. I think it still might be in the comic, which we were talking about.
Oh, I am the Knight?
Right. Like, you don't own the Knight, man. I am the Knight. Like, I would never say that to someone that was like dangling me like, oh, you don't own this time of day and this month and September. You don't own September, man. Let me go. Like, that's just a weird, it's akin to the Martha. Like, if my mom was in trouble, I would be like, Teresa. Like,
well, I mean, when you're getting tangled, that's a weird time for insouciance. That's a weird time.
I admire your specificity.
So yeah, I mean, I think Batman, and in this movie, I think what we can talk about that's very interesting in this movie is, I think the people, whoever is involved, from the producers to Tim Burton, the people who cast this thing. Now, again, we all know that Jack Nicholson was the first person attached, and we got to give props there. But everybody blows Jack Nicholson all the time, so fine. But Kim Basinger coming in, as you stated, late.
They had already pretty much started, and they're like, "Can you come to London tomorrow?"
Yeah.
Be here for like 3 months.
I mean, I can't envision anybody else being Vicky Vale, honestly. This version of the character that is frankly... Now, we just watched this, so I don't think it's not changed with nostalgia what I'm about to say. This chick knows what she wants from the get-go, and it's to talk to this rich guy. Not to bang him or nothing, but just to really talk to him and get to know him. And then once she gets to know him, she's like, I'm going to bang this guy. And she goes after what she wants, and she gets her man. And she has sex with him. And then as we talked about, after she has sex with him, the whole rest of the plot hinges on her being like, wait a minute, I just had sex with this fool. He don't want to kick it with me all next week. He says he's on a business trip. Alfred said he's not on a business trip. I can't have been ghosted. You know?
Yeah, it's very funny, like... I never really thought about it until really this watch. And I watched this movie like last week. It's not like it's been years. I watched this a week ago.
That blew my mind. I haven't watched it in a while.
But it was like, she was just like, I don't know if she's just like a psycho stalker or stupid or just like that full of herself that she's just like, well, it can't just be that he doesn't like me. There must be more to the story. And literally just sits in her car and follows him for a day. Like, I don't know. Like, it is funny because you're right. Like, she for a quote unquote damsel, which like I feel like they've moved a lot away from that trope now in these types of movies. Like, I feel like the Raimi Spider-Man was kind of the last era of a damsel in distress.
Right.
But that's kind of what, the trope that she filled in this. But she was oddly, for the time, a strong character in her own right.
Oh, she oddly had a lot of upper body strength because this broad was getting dangled from every goddamn thing. And she was hanging on all the time.
But she is relentless in dating Bruce Wayne.
Dude, I'm telling you. And that's why, honestly, bro, I mean, I'm not trying to be this, like, weird, fake neckbeard feminist. But it's like, she went after her man, dude. She was like, look, she was almost like a dream girls. You're gonna love me. You know what I mean? Because, like, dude, she really went after it, and then she had an ally and Alfred. You know what I mean? Like, she won Alfred's heart before she won Bruce's, I think.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there must be a deleted scene out there where she like calls Alfred and be like, "What should I like? You know him. What should I do?" Like,
but that's such a weird scene, though. It's like I think they cut it out because it's like. She's like asking like his servant what his master wants. Like,
but it is they are definitely in some sort of cahoots or something.
Yeah, they're like in cahoots like a boat.
He's pushing for her the whole movie and then lets her into the Batcave. I mean, look, I guess like that doesn't bother me as much as it bothers some people. It's like Alfred let her in the Batcave. It's like she knew at that point. It's like Bruce Wayne gets shot. She turns around and looks and he's disappeared. So there's one of two things. Either he's Obi-Wan Kenobi and disappears when he dies, or he's actually Batman. She knows.
And, I think, and even if there is some room for her to believe that he's just a strange-ass dude who, like, maybe ran away and because it was, like, super, like, hey, I just barely survived that. I'm out of here,
that's a deal breaker. Like if she's still in there, he's like, well, I've already been shot once. Good night, everybody.
That's the weird part about that scene. Like, just as a narrative scene, like, okay, it's known that you want this lady, and you're a psycho person, so you have her. You shot her bow, and you have her right there. And why do you like leave to go do anything? Like anything else he could have done in the movie, he could have done with her. Captured some kind of way. I'm glad they didn't do that. But I'm like, what was motivating that? Just the sheer terror of like, I can get at you anytime I want to, so I don't really have to keep you anywhere. Peace. Yay.
Yeah,
Was that it?
I don't really know. I like when we were watching that scene, I was like, I feel like
there's something there's some connective tissue missing.
And I definitely think, we talk a lot about just in general about movies, about like quote unquote studio interference, and I don't think this is necessarily studio interference because he literally went to London to get away from anyone that could come in and like bother them. But I do think that like if you got Jack Nicholson and you have Michael Keaton and you have your screenwriter and you have Tim Burton and you have Kim Basinger and Tim Burton encourages like people's input, it just feels like this was an idea that like someone came up with that morning and they're like, let's just try this. Or and I even said with the let's get nuts, I was like, Michael Keaton, I bet you was just like, hey, can I just do a scene where I monologue?
Yeah. Well, can I do something to show everybody that I'm not like a goofball that happens to be a raging psycho? I'm a raging psycho pretending to be a goofball pretty good most of the time.
Right.
And I'm going to let the mask slip, quote unquote, in this scene.
There's one, I've talked about this before. I listened to this other podcast called Hey, Do You Remember? And those guys are all great. And I listened to their episode about Batman that they did a couple years ago. And they brought up a really good point. I want to get your take on this. We get to see in that scene Bruce Wayne. You know, we know he's like, we're like, oh, he's as crazy as the Joker. He just happens to be on the right side. Like he can get nuts. Do you think that it would have been more effective if we had seen a scene like that for Jack before he turned into the Joker, so we knew the potential that crazy he could get, but because he's pretty subdued, and then he turns into Joker, and it's at a volume 10. But like, should there have been a moment where he went just a little too far as Jack and then reeled it back in, and then once he turns Joker, it's just...
Well, you know what? I think it's a more modern thing, and I think that's why Deer Hunter is so effective for a certain generation of people who see it. It's more effective now to do a character who is selfless to the point where they don't care about their... It's like the psycho, you know what I'm saying? This guy doesn't care about his own well-being, so why would he care about mine? It's kind of a more modern idea. I think in 1989, they were like, this dude is a sadist at every single turn for every single reason he can think of, and there are a myriad because he's intelligent. So this intelligent person can come up with a bunch of reasons, artistic and otherwise, to hurt you. And now we got to deal with this person. So even as a regular thug, he was coming up with artful ways to people up, coming up with bon mot. You know what I'm saying? Like, think about the future, fat boy. I know I'm adding the fat boy, but it's hilarious.
Eggheart.
Yeah. In the moment when you're watching this movie, moment to moment, things flood you, different memories. I remember the very first time seeing it as a little baby kid, when Commissioner Gordon hears that Jack Napier is gonna raid the chemical factory, and the black I never forget the black deputy. Representation matters. The black deputy, he goes like, well, what was I notified about this? Pat Hingle goes as Commissioner Gordon. Why was I notified about this? Who's in charge? Black deputy. Eckhart, sir. That always hit me. That like, damn, everybody knows Eckhart sucks. Everybody knows this guy sucks. And just saying that to the commissioner, and he goes, let's go. That let's go.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. Oh my God. Let's go. That let's go is in my mind forever.
I mean, it's just like, it's a great, like, it tells you everything you need to know about the corruption of the Gotham City police force. That the fact that it's like, we know that this lieutenant is bad and he's in league with all these people, and there's nothing really either we can or we will do about it.
And it intones in a very economical screenwriting way that the commissioner knows, and there's only a few people he can really trust. So he gets his personal task force. He personally has to do this. He can't delegate it to anybody.
Right.
He can't tell XYZ deputy to go do it, because in that chain of command, somebody's going to tip off and up the game. So he has to get his personal guard, his personal Imperial Guard of Gotham's finest, to go break up this thing at the chemical factory. Very economically stated in a scene.
Let's talk about, let's shift gears for a second. Another name that does not get brought up a lot, but a guy who had probably, in my opinion, the most impossible task to try to accomplish in this movie, and that's Bob Ringwood. And Bob Ringwood was the costume designer. This was the guy that was going to have to look at these Batman comics and make a suit that fit into the world of this movie.
Right.
So, again, you know, I already said at the beginning, like, there was Batman, and then there was Black Batman, and that was the all black suit, and I was like, okay, that's a little dangerous, you know.
It's just so hilarious that the Black Batman was dangerous to your young little mind. They get you so early. You see, get you so early.
Black suited Batman.
Well, hey, no, you're talking about a Batman that says "Sweet Christmas." I know what you're talking about. No, I'm just joking. But like, it gets you so early. But yeah,
I do think it's like that. It
wasn't gray.
It wasn't gray. Obviously, you couldn't do the stupid underwear, which I've never liked, no matter what. But there was no blue. There was very, very little yellow. But it was all black, and it was like. The other thing that was interesting that actually, like, I feel like this movie, for better or worse, was the catalyst for every comic book movie that came after, was you had Christopher Reeve work out like a crazy person. He's a big guy,
Mm-hmm.
and the Superman fit him. But then you get Michael Keaton, and it's like, well, this guy's 5'10". You know, he's 130 pounds soaking wet. We need rubber.
160. Come on, man. Jeez.
All right,
he's not a jockey. What the...
He's lean. He's very lean.
I
think he's a runner. But my point being is, like, you know, this was the hard rubber body suit that became kind of a staple of like what a superhero would wear. It's like the sculpted abs, you know, like
from the get-go, like you said, I think on one of our other podcasts where you said something about like there was a Greek god sort of situation.
That was Joel Schumacher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was very into like, these should look like they were carved, you know, statuesque, and which is why he put the nipples on. He's like, it should feel like, well, if you're panning across a shot of these gargoyles and one of them just stood up and came to life, that would be Batman.
Right. Right. And so like, but I think this one was like, I think the germ of that idea was there from like a long time ago because of how gothic everything else was in the world. You know what I mean? You couldn't have him have something. Bottom line, Batman with fabric doesn't work. Batman's cape, even in this Super 4K rendition we just watched, you can really look at how leathery and Lee Bermejo, for real comics fans, how leathery and Lee Bermejo this cape is. Lee Bermejo draws one of the Batmans that I think is most convincing because it looks like he just repurposed a bunch of leather coats. Like he went to like Project Runway and had them make him a bunch of take a bunch of Matrix leather coats and make him into this kind of largish cape for about a 6'4" man. You know what I mean? And it's got a real leather patina to it that looks really sick when he's running and moving in it. It looks really lived in and real in the way that, like, I guess Star Wars blew people's minds. You know what I mean? Like the Batman cape from any other iteration has never had that weight. And even the newer ones, it never had that weight again, really.
I think what you just said is something about this whole movie, not just the suit, but it's like, this Gotham is dirty. Yep. And everything looks like it's been used and gross and lived in. Whereas when we move even to something that I love, Returns and Forever and Robin are very slick and they're very clean and it looks very inky. Whereas this looks very dirty.
Well, it also starts to transition Batman into almost a future. And as Michael Uslan said, you know, when you ask him why did the movies change, he goes like, well, the comics changed. It went from dirty dark where Batman would shoot people, then it went to lighter and lighter and lighter until we went to sort of back to Detective Tales, and then it's kind of started to go more towards Batgod now. So I kind of it's interesting that this movie will be seen as the start for what will eventually be some weird Grant Morrison take on Batman. Like, we're always 20 years behind
the
in
Batman
regards to the
Inc.
take,
right?
We're always 20, 30 years behind as far as the take. Like, we just got up to Frank Miller Daredevil. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Just now, and they tried to do almost Bollywood-ass Daredevil. You know what I mean? And then they did Frank Miller Daredevil for a while in the Netflix. We're getting up to just past, I guess, you know, the Silver Age, and as far as how people depict him, maybe the 70s.
I always liked this bat costume. I think I appreciate what they did in Batman Returns with turning it like more kind of mechanical, you know, like it's not so much abs anymore as it is kind of like a rigid machine. I kind of like this one.
I think we talked about it as like a Zydeco band,
right?
Type instrument, like
right, literally a washboard, yeah.
Right.
But one thing that I always think is interesting. Well, I think two things. One, it drives me banana pants that his bat logo is different than like all of the marketing for Batman.
And you know what really drives me banana pants about it is if you really look at it, it's meant, I think, almost to represent like the little feet of the mouse part of the bat.
Yeah.
And that's so stupid. That's the original nipples on suits thing. The fact that those
bat
little
feet.
Yeah, the bat feet.
It's just like stupid. It's like 2 lines too much.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I think is interesting now, and maybe this is more of a product of like where we are with comic book movies and the machine of, you know, one affecting the other, but I always thought it was kind of weird that This movie comes out, mega hit, Batman, head to toe black. And it never really made its way over to the comic books. Like, he still kept his comic costume, which now they, you can tell what the new movie outfit's going to be about a year before the movie comes out, because they start putting it in the comics and they all look the same, So it's all simpatico, by the time you get out of the movie, you can go buy the comic book and they'll fool you into thinking it's the same thing.
Well, you know what? The Ben Affleck suit seems to be like a little bit Bermejo, a little bit, old school, a little bit of all of the almost militaristic versions of Batman.
It's like 100. It's exactly the new 52 kind of design. Yeah. And I think that's kind of like
with all the padding, almost like a football player, like the padding in segments.
It's like the compromise that we've made nowadays, but like you don't really see blue in Batman anymore. Like we've definitely adopted like the black for the cowl and the cape.
Yeah.
But I was just surprised, like looking, even like I went back not too long ago looking through like 91, 92, 93, these Batman stories, like did they even change it for like a month just to try to like tie in? And not really.
Oh, dude, what's interesting about Batman's costume is like gold keeps coming up so much. Like you would think gold isn't the color for the creature of the night, but like every time that belt isn't yellow, people lose their shit.
Which is why I said it was so weird that people were so mad about the nipples on the Batman Forever suit. But that's the first Batman suit where they actually made the belt black. Like, if you want to talk about the most stealth suit, it's probably George Clooney's, where even like they took the yellow out of the bat emblem, and it's just kind of like engraved in there in a dark black blue.
And then of course there's always these narrative reasons, like Frank Miller's Dark Knight, they say it's meant to be a target because it's really reinforced and but it's like, I think the gold, just stylistically, it adds an accent to the suit that seems to be necessary on some level for us to recognize him as him. I'm staring at a maquette or something of Ben Affleck Batman that has a yellow belt. You know what I mean?
Which I don't know if that's canon to that movie or not. A lot of times they make those things before they even come out. But yeah, look, there's the Batman Returns one there and a Batman animated series doll over there. Like you can see, like the gold is never. It's always been a part of it. I don't know why tactically it is there.
It's so weird.
Yeah,
it's like the mouth hole. Like I've scoured comics, and the closest I can get is like they put, Cassandra Cain has a covered up mouth hole, and it's like stitched to make it look insane, which was cool and was a great part of her aesthetic. But like, all of them got their mouths out except for Red Hood. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, tying it back to this movie though, I think it shouldn't work as well as it does, but Keaton in that suit to me becomes someone else. Like I kind of lose sight that Michael Keaton is in that suit, especially the way it's lit. A lot of times it's like you can't see the eyes or you don't see the mouth. You
see. I mean, I think this also is a case where I don't know if they pioneered this, but like the black under the eyes and around the eyes, you know what I'm saying? The sort of a raccoon effect.
They must have, right? Because definitely Adam West didn't do that.
Yeah, it's just this blackness where it's just like these eyes are sitting in nothingness, and occasionally you see a glint under there. But for the most part, they're infinite black pools. Not even that white, that almost comforting white iris that's in all the comic books and all the cartoons and stuff. No. Real eyes, way back in there. In the blackness.
Yeah, and it's so funny how embarrassed they are of it later in the movies. Like, because they do it in every single Batman movie, but every single Batman movie, it's like he takes off his cowl and is magically not there. It's like, just, it's fine.
Well, then he threw in that Kylie Jenner that takes I'm going to peel out this moisturizer real quick. Whoop, whoop. See? Wipes. But I really think overall the costume and the production design, but also getting into the performances and stuff though, everybody, we were talking about it in the movie. It was like a lot of the movie is framed so well. The shots that he starts scenes on and then widens out into are really beautiful. What the rare times he chooses to do an establishing shot are very well chosen. I mean, just as a filmmaking exercise, honestly, I think you could do a lot worse than looking at this. There's a verisimilitude to the world and how he shoots the world in here. And there is a staginess to how people are acting. But I think it's intentional.
Yeah, I definitely think this movie has its own kind of cadence and rhythm. And like we said, like at times, especially like for me in the museum, like I almost feel like I am watching a very expensive like production of a play, you know?
Right.
But I also think like that's just Burton was never a big like action director. I don't think he ever set out to be. So like when you one of the notes of this movie that came back, they were like, it needs more action. It needs more action. So that's where they added the scene of the Batmobile going into Axis Chemicals, blowing it the hell up and driving out, was because they're like, it needs something. You've just lingered on people talking for 2 hours. Like, Batman needs to do something. So that was definitely like a pickup / reshoot from a note that this movie needed more action. And when you watch it, even looking at like, there isn't a ton of action in this. There's really like maybe 2 or 3 set pieces. Because even when he beats up those criminals at the beginning, I wouldn't call it like an action scene.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, they go a long time without doing anything you would call action. But I think especially for the 1989 audience, the threat of Batman around every corner, and when they did do Batman, you saw, I think, enough Batman to pique your interest. Like when the initial scene of him fighting those dudes in Axis Chemicals or whatever, and the proto Joker getting in his way and getting his cheeks up. Where did I get these scars? You blocked a bullet and my cheeks up.
I mean, by the way, it's like we're supposed to think that surgeon like messed him up. It's like that surgeon took a bullet out of his face and didn't leave a single scar there. Like 5 stars on Yelp from me for the urgent care surgeon.
Do his line. Do
you see what I have to work with here?
Dude, while we were watching it, he like basically mouthed that as the guy did it. It seemed like I've seen these 4 movies. It's almost impossible for me to talk about one without the other 3. I've seen these 4 movies collectively more than anything I've ever watched in my entire life. Easily. I've seen this. This is the second time I've watched this in a calendar week. Like, I know these movies like the back of my hand. That's why I said, like, sometimes it's hard for me to talk about it objectively. But also, like, when you think about the shortcomings, but you talk about, like, the production of this thing, like, I don't think anyone had, like, now it's like, you know, Avengers Endgame just came out, and it's just like, I can't imagine putting that together. But imagine if nothing had ever come out before and you're just like making it up as you went along. Sure, you had Donner's Superman, but Donner's Superman, I feel like, was trying to accomplish something very different than what Tim Burton's Batman had to accomplish. I mean, there's barely CGI. There's proto optical effects. There's so many optical shots in this movie that would literally be they'd be CW level, you know, CGI these days, but they had to do it optically.
Even the shields on the Batmobile, that's stop motion animation. That's not CG.
Yeah.
You know,
like Phil Tippett type
right,
shit.
Yeah. And like you said, the Fleischer drawings, the first time we see Batman in the Batman movie is a drawing.
Yeah. It's a straight piece of animation with his cape flowing in a Bakshi type style, and then they do it at the end when Joker falls to his doom. It's like, I'm falling into a cool world. It's so funny. Say peace to Roger Rabbit. You know,
barring those things though, even the Prince song doesn't date this for me too much. Like, I still feel like there are some things I'm going to show.
We're talking about Party Man while they're doing the
both of Party Man or Trust, you know?
Yeah.
But I do feel like there's some movies that, like, look, as much as I personally love it, someday I'm going to show my kids Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, and they're going to be like, the hell is this?
Yeah.
I feel like you could show a kid Batman now, and minus a couple scenes, like, it doesn't feel like it was made 30 years ago.
I mean, again, things with such a singular voice. People toss around classic a whole bunch. And I just think things are classic when they obviously outlive their time. But I think the things that make them do that are just really basic. And one of those things isn't necessarily just appealing to people because people change so much. I think it's being so singular that you last. You know what I mean? In this movie's case, I mean, applause to Warner Brothers for putting this thing out, dude. When you really think about it,
right?
What's happening in this movie is really psycho for 1989.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that gets lost. I talk about I can't remember which podcast we did. It might have been Justice League. I talk about like there's this new car smell wave of thinking where it's like Batman it begins in The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises just like invalidated everything that came before. And it's like, but everything that came from this, like you wouldn't have had that evolution to a Batman Begins without this. Like I'm even talking like immediately you have Batman the Animated Series, which takes a lot of character designs, and also its main title theme is based around the score of Danny Elfman.
Right, and the timelessness factor in regards to production design.
The Art Deco.
Yeah, they could have very easily made that super modern for the time, the 1980s America. They chose not to.
I think also like you have
90s America.
Right, you have to think too of like obviously not as big of a success, and I'll tell you why, was the short-lived The Flash TV show with Wesley Shipp as The Flash, which was very much made in the style of Tim Burton's Batman. I'm talking about the muscle suit. Danny Elfman wrote the theme for the show.
I thought I made that up. I was about to say that, but I thought I made it up. Like, dude, Ed doesn't know. He just does these stupid riffs. Get him out of there.
Much like Batman the Animated Series, Danny Elfman wrote the theme for The Flash, and then Shirley Walker, who did she did the theme for Batman the Animated Series and all the music for it. Shirley Walker did all the music for The Flash. Danny Elfman wrote the theme, but it's very much like you could see DC was like, okay, I guess this is how we do comic book stuff now. And the reason that show died after a season was not because it was like such a failure and no one watched it.
Wasn't it too expensive?
It was over $1.5 million per episode, which at the time, like, not even at the time, even now, that's a lot of money. But at the time, that's like $10 million an episode.
Man, the friends don't even get that much until they renegotiated.
It's just like they tried to make it so so Tim Burton that they're like, oh, we just can't keep up with this. Like maybe if we had done a Flash movie, it would be a different story.
But we're talking about Batman for a reason, and I think of all the characters that could have had this much success, Batman is the one. It's like it's deterministic. When all on their faces, you look at all the DC characters, the ones that were going to have this culture-changing success. Superman was. We're not talking about that movie now, but that was a culture shifter. But you saw that there was no follow-up. You know what I mean? No real follow-up. And then we get all the way to 1989, and now it's a real culture shifter. And then what? Blade is besides Batman 2, Blade is the next thing that goes like, oh, I'm gonna shift how we see this thing. So this is like one of the key Infinity Stones, to do a hackneyed metaphor, of like changing the game.
I actually think that all three members of the DC Trinity have changed the game, because obviously Superman was the godfather of it all. It started it. I think to its detriment, the character Superman cannot shake that Donner movie. There's a lot of stuff we can't get away from. I think Batman came out and took this stuff so seriously that it changed a lot of people's perception of not only that character, but of summer blockbusters. And you can open a PG-13 movie and it can be the biggest thing ever. And also, by the way, movies aren't going to play in a theater for 3 years and then it's gone forever. It's like, nope, it plays in the theater in the summer and then by Christmas it's on video. Thank you, Batman. And I think Wonder Woman came around, and her movie just a couple of years ago also changed the paradigm. I think that's where we saw, like, it's no longer just, stuff made for 7-year-old boys anymore. Like that opened the inclusivity. I would put Wonder Woman also on I would put Black Panther also in there in terms of like this era of inclusivity. But in terms of just like, it's interesting that the three kind of like pilot movies for the Trinity of DC have all been like game changers.
Yeah. And I think that's just a testament to how powerful and how cool those characters are. And one thing, I mean, I think people think that I DC bash. I just think that their characters are so iconic, you need to handle them more carefully. Like each character of DC's Trinity, and even if you want to bring it out to a quintuplet or whatever, all of those characters are so heavy. They're like, ironically, Thor's hammer. You gotta be worthy, and you gotta move them around accordingly. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you have to have these takes that are serious business. And a 1989's Batman is a real take. They're not trying to be too funny. They're not trying to be too gothic. They're trying to be dark, but still, I think, pretty fun in regards to how they're putting all this stuff together. They're trying to keep a madcap sense of anything can happen, but also have it grounded enough for Batman to be hurt enough to be stumped. That last part, as goofy as that last act is, Batman is really up from crashing his
plane. A plane crash, my God.
Like if you had to stumble out of Lost into a gauntlet of dudes in a cathedral and walk up a bunch of steps. His quads are hurting like a mother when he gets into that fight.
Kudos to Jack Nicholson for going up 450 flights of stairs.
450 flights of matte paintings.
So you talked about iconic characters and their takes. I think, weirdly enough, because I just would never have thought this would be the case, but Joker has, maybe since Heath Ledger, has become like this thing where people feel this sense of ownership about what Joker is and what he's supposed to be, which, again, I really hate that. I really hate when people say, this character is supposed to be this. It's like...
Well, but also, this whole thing of like, if it's good and if it's presented with the proper, I think we've used the word context 500 times today, but it's super true because like nobody, you notice how nobody tripped on the fact that Mark Hamill, frankly, and Kevin Conroy, frankly, were Batman and Joker for everybody for decades, basically. And then they dropped, you know what I mean, Christian Bale on us with this stupid voice. And then they bring out Heath Ledger, the guy from the Night movie and the Cowboys. I don't know about this. You know what I mean? And he does a take that makes you not compare it to Mark Hamill. It wasn't greater than Mark Hamill or greater than Jack Nicholson, but it was so good you chose not to compare it to other things. Unless you're one of these guys who just like you said, have to wash everything from the past away.
Yeah, there was definitely when I talk about the new car smell thinking for like what came before is now completely invalidated. I actually think Jack Nicholson took the brunt of that because Heath Ledger's performance was just so outside of the box and he interpreted that character very differently. In my opinion, it's an amazing performance. It's like not the character of the Joker that I'm used to. It seems more like just a very frightening force of nature than like the Joker. Whereas I've always personally preferred Jack Nicholson's Joker because that's a version of the character. Like he's scary. Like, do I look like I'm joking? You know, with his grin. But he has little gags. Like he's just a goofball, and you don't know if he's going to kill you or like make you laugh, you know?
Yeah. There is also the weight of age.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like this guy has had longer to be crazy, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? He's
sure, right.
You know what I mean? He's got all these things built up, all these weird tics over years.
The tics are the things that I have to believe are 100% Jack Nicholson and not in the script. The wait till they get a load of me and then the burp. Yeah, like
you telling me to pay attention to that. Yes, I'd encourage the audience when they're watching this. There's a few points. When the whole opening of when they're about to go to the place where he's going to get Jokerized,
right?
That whole casino scene of like Pat Hingle having his wife blowing the dice and just he's monopolizing the out of this dice game so that they can pope in the bathtub, have people do something interesting while they're delivering exposition, right? And then that whole scene is so dope. Watch that. Watch the thing you just said.
The burp.
Yeah,
burp.
Dude.
But then he does another one too that I love after he makes fun of Jack Palance when he does the "You are my number one." Like Bob walks off and he's like, and like just muttering to himself, and I'm like, that to me is Joker. He just killed someone. He's laughing. He's also like crazy talking to himself, and it makes no sense.
Also, but I think the through line in all those though is their semi-private and basically private moments where he's not putting on any airs. So if you do some crazy like that, that's literally what you really want to do.
Right.
So
that's
it
who
sells
you
the
are.
whole thing.
Right.
Yeah, it sells the whole thing of like that being really him. And that's what I'm saying. The whole movie trucks, for as gothic and weird as it is, it tries real hard, Ringo, to approximate. It tries to build a reality and then go, okay, well, these are the rules. You know what I'm saying? Batman can't get shot enough to where he's incapacitated and people can take his mask off and stuff. Okay? That can't happen. Also, he can swoop down on fools and kick him and smack him with that pops out of his gun. Just random. The bat shark repellent nature of all of Batman's tools in this movie it's so funny in the DNA of Batman.
I think I paused it twice when we were watching, so I was like, what is happening here? Like, I don't understand. I feel like almost like Tim Burton didn't understand what it was supposed to be. It was like, just cut it really close and people will just think it's awesome.
And this is where the comic book is pretty valuable, because like there's a scene where there's a ninja guy with two swords who inexplicably tries to like kick and do a bunch of stuff. Like, you got two swords, just go in swinging your swords. And then so he does a little bit of that, and Batman, blocks him with his gauntlets on his shins and his gauntlets. And then some guy jumps at him and he shoots a big thing out of his gauntlet, like a little stopper, like a little like a stiff arm.
It's just like not coherent the way it's cut. You just like,
oh no, the guy with the knives on his feet
jumps the cathedral, at him. Right.
Yeah, in the cathedral, and he whips out a little stopper out of it, like it's like a Wolverine claw that's dull,
right? That
pops out of the underside of his palm, so that it extends the range of his palm, and that magically solves this boot heel jack motherfucker jumping at it. It's so weird.
That's what I was talking about, like. In Axis Chemicals, I don't want to turn this into cinema sense, but I'm just saying, like in Axis Chemicals, it's right when Jack Napier is about to shoot Commissioner Gordon, and Batman swoops in. He pushes something on his belt, and Jack's about to pull the trigger, and then Batman doesn't even hit him, but like the gun just like doesn't fire, and he drops it. And I'm like, there's some correlation between the two, but that's why I said, like, I don't think Burton is a very good action director. Like, it literally just like there is a different language of film when it comes to action.
Yeah.
And I feel like if him and it seems like a lot of the, like, say what you want about Snyder. At least Snyder can shoot action, but like Nolan doesn't really shoot action very well.
Pull my collar.
Burton doesn't really shoot action very well.
But dude, that's another thing that's in that I'm telling you, dude. It's in the DNA. There's a bunch of nerd bull that people want to do with time machines, right? You tell them, I'd go back and I'd make Neil Adams in charge of DC in 1978 and see what the comics. What people that have all these weird theories that they want to do. I would literally go back and put a real action director. I'd bring some proto action director, maybe from another country, where they got stunt teams that really get fucked up. Like the Raid Redemption, Indonesia type shit. Early, and bring some of those guys over as they were coming up with this. I'll be like, hey man, work with these guys to make a cohesive Batman fighting style that we'll be able to make money off of John Wick style for 20 fucking years.
But
because like they've never, I wish from the get go they saw him as more of a physical character. So many of these movies build up his fighting abilities, but nobody really sees him as a physical character nor a detective. It's like he's the physical detective. That's the point.
Agreed. Although I feel like
in this movie, he detects more than anything. I forgot how much he detects in this movie.
He cracks the whole code.
Detection.
Yeah,
he saves the city through detection,
through science.
That must be
we
put
don't
out
see
there.
It, but
fine. But he does it though.
Right. Look, I would rather Batman be in his Bat cave and it's just like, I figured it out. It's all science. Here you go. Than as much as I even love, I know you don't, but I love The Dark Knight. I've seen the bullet in the cement brick scene about 100 times and I still have no idea what is happening.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what is happening? So, but to your point, I don't think you can take Tim Burton out of this. Like, you're just talking about like a different movie, like Into the Spider-Verse.
I'm saying, I just think you're absolutely right that for this particular take, there are things that are more important.
Yes.
And that's why we aren't the goddamn producers and directors until we do assume those mantles through sheer effort and determination, like most of these people that we're ragging on,
like Michael Uslan, who, right? No, I mean,
Tim Burton was the guy to do this movie, whether or not he can show people, and he did. Batman did some sidekicks. They look pretty nice.
Yeah, look, that's also like you have to acknowledge the limitations of the suit. There are definitely times where, like, Michael Keaton looks like, just get me out of this thing.
Sometimes Michael Keaton looks like RoboCop.
Just like cannot move, cannot breathe, cannot do anything. But I think, when we talk about Batman 89 and you talk about what did moving forward. Like, I just feel like a lot of times, like, there's a reason that we're talking about this movie 30 years later, and there's a handful of like comic book movies that I really enjoy that we're just not going to be taught, that we don't talk about, you know? Like, I think that this movie changed so many things. Like we talked about even just like, I know it doesn't seem like a big deal to us now, like it doesn't seem like anything, but changing the theatrical window to like 6 to 9 months rather than like, you know, a video cassette that was priced to own. Here's something you may not know, kids, depending on how old you are. It's like, you know, you want a new movie comes out on DVD, you go buy it, it's $20, right? Back in the day, the only way you could get a VHS was if you were Blockbuster. You would pay for that video. If you paid for a VHS, like if you lost it at Blockbuster, a lot of times it was like $150 to replace it, because they weren't meant to be owned at home. Here Comes Batman changes that paradigm completely. It says $20, put it out, everyone's going to buy it for the holiday. Everyone did buy it for the holiday.
Dude, I'm really glad that you said that, because I think that time capsule aspect was lost on a lot of people. It was lost on me. I do remember how big that cassette was, and I know I had that and it was like, yeah. It was like that one. I'm of the age where I was a little baby kid, and my mom let me watch Eddie Murphy. So I had 2 tapes that were worn the out,
right?
And they came out 5 years apart. They were Beverly Hills Cop and Batman '89. They got worn. I let my tape rock till my tape pop.
But I mean, theater owners were furious because this was in a way like a little bit of the beginning of the death of second run theaters, because now we think of like dollar theaters and it's like, you know, oh yeah, this movie came out in June. It's July 27th and I missed it. I guess I'll go see it at a dollar theater while it's there for a month. But before, it was like a movie would play for like a year in a first run theater and then go to a second run theater for like 6 more months. And theater owners were furious because this was the beginning of like home entertainment, really.
Well, pricing out people who couldn't afford the first run of it but could afford the second run of it, and just taking them and throwing them into the sun. Yeah, I figure every time you do that to people, it's like, you know, it's almost like a Boogie Nights situation. You know, it's like these are the people of the world. These are the real people of the world.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't at least touch upon the music of Batman. Not just Prince, but also Danny Elfman and the combination of the two. I know that there's a lot of people that like, I really love Batman, but the Prince songs, I would take them out. I'm like, man, you lose those Prince songs to me. You lose a big chunk of like the like what makes this movie stand out to me. That parade scene with Trust playing, you know.
I mean, Prince being like the dominant radio artist in a weird Drake-esque, you know, Imagine Dragons type fashion, you know what I mean, is interesting to me. Like, it sets that world apart. I think that's the reason why they would do something like that, to let an artist do something like that all over their movie. It sets that world apart.
Right. I know Tim Burton was very, like, reluctant, and it was just, like, you know, one of the reasons why he was like, Tim Burton doesn't love this movie. You know, I think a lot of it was just personal experience. Obviously, you work on a project and they change your whole third act without telling you. It's going to be a tough shoot for you. But I know that another one of their notes was like, well, you have to put in Prince music, which, by the way, I don't know if a lot of people know this, the original idea, and I'm not 100% sure why this didn't end up panning out, but the original idea, imagine this back in the day, this would have been like the biggest selling album of all time. It was going to be that Michael Jackson was going to write the Bruce Wayne kind of Vicky Vale love songs, and Prince was going to write all the Joker related songs, and that was going to be the album. Like, that would have been like the biggest selling album possibly of all time. It ended up just being Prince, but even so, like, you know, those 2 songs plus Bat Dance, which is not in the movie, unless it's playing like incidentally in the background somewhere that I just didn't catch, but yeah, that was a huge hit. Yeah. And then Scandalous, which is my favorite.
This is a real sex jam.
I'm gonna
for such a prude looking fucker.
I can't wait to tell my kid someday, like, you know, you were conceived with Prince's Scandalous playing in the background, right? I'm gonna play it at their graduation.
Yeah, my kid will be conceived to trust. Trust.
Sex. It's not that kind of party.
I want it to be with me.
I think this, and also, we talk about, Batman coming on video cassette, and that was kind of like, there were obviously other movies on video cassette that you could buy, but in terms of the theatrical window, that was a big deal. Another thing that Batman did that was a big deal that a lot of other movies never did, and now they do it a lot, was 2 soundtrack albums. One that was the music from it, and the other is the score.
Well, I mean, and that's what I'm talking about in regards to branding. It seems like Batman in the movie is very conscious to tell you who he is. And I really think this whole movie seems like a Batman concert film. This is like Batman as Beyonce, and I think he's just like, I'm here.
Bruce's Lemonade.
Yeah, just Sasha Fierce. You know what I mean?
But I think that's what makes the music so great, is that I feel like you could almost take the dialogue out and just have Danny Elfman's score, and you have a general idea of what's happening.
I mean, and hot take here, but I think this has the perfect amount of score. I don't think this is like a droning, hit you in your face all the time. We looked at some of the scenes where when somebody's accosted in an alley, I think it's the scene where Bruce's parents get killed.
It's the flashback, yeah.
Yeah, they cut out the sound all together.
And it's like, it takes your breath away, like it punches you, like, because you've been, you've had these majestic, bombastic moments, descent into mystery, where the Batmobile's going into the woods, and it's just this big fanfare, and then you get that, you get this haunting, like the voices, and they do kind of like the Tim Burton, the Beetlejuice, like the voices kind of drop out a little bit, like and then boom, it's like just the ambient air, and you hear the gunshot, and it's like just like I said, like a fever dream. It's like see you around, kid. It's like not quite slow-mo, but it's just a little bit,
Yeah, and in those moments, the staginess from them shooting it at Pinewood Studios and just shooting it like basically inside all the time, like outside. No, outside's inside too. Everywhere's inside. That forest, bunch of models inside. You know what I mean?
But you know what? Another thing that I didn't even think of, and it's just like I grew up with the Batman '66 until this movie, and then that was like, oh, there's other versions of Batman. I wasn't even aware that Batman had parents that were dead, because it's not an issue in Batman '66. Like, that's not
right.
I mean, maybe they allude to it. I don't know that show well enough.
At some point, they say something about it, but it's very like '60s and passing. Like, oh, tragedy bored me. Anyway, so would you like some Jello with ham in it? Because it's coming out of the '50s.
We have to go stop the egg pun guy. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It wasn't like, but this, now there's that joke. There's that video of like every time the Waynes have been killed in cinema or whatever, and it's like it's been done 100,000 times, but this was like the first time that we like saw it, and I think it was to me it's still one of the most effective. I think Batman Begins also does a very different take on it, which is also super effective.
Well, I think this is the one though that makes it be as blank as it can be. There's this thing we were on SJU, and I don't want to connect everything to Screen Junkies, but like on SJU we were talking about like people's rendition of certain characters being stuck in there, and I think this we were talking about Keanu and how he's kind of blank, and you could just sort of put yourself in all of his movies.
Right.
This was the blankest, for lack of a better word, version of Bruce and the whole situation ever, and but at the same time moving, because it was like you're just watching from the outside this chubby little innocent kid
get his whole a little chubster, man.
Like
a cute chubster.
Yeah, but get his whole world taken. But he was like a realistic kid. They always have these like you're gonna grow up to be a lantern jawed kids play Bruce all the time. This was just like a kid, like a kid.
So let me ask you, what did you think of the movie using the connection between Joker or Jack Napier being the killer to Bruce?
I mean, Bruce's parents. Big takes are how you change the culture. These middle of the road milquetoast takes on Batman that we've gotten from maybe the last 5 or so years aren't gonna last. People will remember them. They'll remember like the middle Batman movies, which are good in their own right, and some of them are great swings like Batman Forever. But for the most part, they lag behind this movie and things like Batman Begins and to a certain extent Batman Returns, because you got to take a big swing. This movie's big swing was I made you made me first.
Right.
That was the hugest swing. And for me, I don't know that this movie's a cultural phenomenon if they don't do that. Maybe that's a hot take. But I think if they don't do that, I don't know that the people get it as much. That the Joker gets what's coming to him. But at the same time, it's a very proto version of these movies in that the villain has to die. Because we're finding out more and more in these 30 years later, we're realizing you don't have to kill the villain at the end of everything.
I think one thing that this movie did that some of the later, and not even Batman movies, but just comic book movies in general, where they made a misstep, certainly phase 1 of the Marvel movies, or maybe even phase 2, is that even if it's not canon to the comics, you definitely have to have a personal reason why this hero wants to stop this villain, and it can't just be because it's the right thing to do. Like, there has to be more of an emotional connection. And for me, I don't mind at all. Like, hot take, if you had a hot take, here's a hotter take. I think that this is better than it just being Joe Chill or just some random person. I like the idea that this is like all connected, and for this world, like, it works. And I think this is going to sound like a tangent, but it actually makes a lot of sense. I think that we have come to a point now, and I give all the credit in the world to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse for getting not comic book people, but average Joe who walks into a movie and doesn't see, maybe sees 1 or 2 comic book movies in their life, to open their minds to this possibility that this character can exist in this world, and there are multiverses with the same character that is a different universe that exists at the same time. And I think once people adopt that mindset, like the average people, that don't read the comics or don't even really care about that, once they can accept that these other stories are valid, they just exist in their own multiverse, their own universe. Like, I feel like that takes a lot of the weight off of the shoulders of, like, Joker doesn't do that. Joker is a force of nature. He is in that one, but in this one, in this multiverse, in this universe, he was a gangster named Jack Napier, who he was the one that killed his parents,
Right. I mean, again, we're always 30, 40 years behind the comics when we're looking at how people can interpret all this information. The fact that it took till 17, 18 for people to really dig the multiverse.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just, we're always lagging so far behind, and I just think this particular take being so, like, out of time and out of step, and just like, and I think that I think that's the DC universe's power, is it doesn't have to approximate reality. I really wish they would lean into that a little bit more, because I think when you try to make it be like everybody's on Twitter in the DC universe, that sounds so stupid.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm not saying they'd have something better than Twitter. I'm saying, yes, they'd probably have Twitter, but they'd also have, like, kaiju alerts and Alexa Pro, but it's like a professional program that lets you know what Lex Luthor's some shit up, or lets you know what stocks he's buying or something. You know what I mean? Like, there's all these different things that would exist because these larger than life mythic characters exist. And I think with the Marvel universe, it'd be like, yeah, you'd probably get traffic alerts with, the Hulk smash and stuff. But overall, it's more trying to have some verisimilitude between it and regular reality.
I think the fact that Batman is one of the most popular characters of all time. I think if this movie failed, that's not the case. I think Batman would be dead and buried.
This is what put all the Batman sherps on the uncontacted tribesmen.
Right.
This particular product did that. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, no, look, and I, like I said, I think part of my nerddom, my fandom of Batman, of comic books, of all of this stuff is directly tied in. Like, if you try to find the vortex, the center of all of this, it comes back to Batman 89, because if this movie doesn't exist, it's the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
If this movie doesn't work, it's the butterfly effect. Yeah. Imagine if Batman 89 had crashed, burned, huge failure, no one talked about it. It would be decades before comic book movies. Like, we would be so far back. Maybe right now we would be getting, like, the Blade 2s and Daredevils of the early 2000s. You know what I mean?
Like right now,
Like, we would
audiences
still be-
watching
right.
Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck fight in broad daylight.
We'd still be trying to figure it out. And like, we've talked about this a lot, where it's like there was a period of time because of these Batman. Look, and that's not to say all of it's positive. Batman 89 started with like, we can take this seriously and we can make this a real thing that people want to see. Within 8 years, they went full circle to this is now embarrassing again,
Right.
And then,
right.
and, we talked about how like, X-Men was kind of like, okay, it's that one's a little Batman 89. And then you had other superhero movies that came out that like Raimi's Spider-Man that was like, no, we're going to go more kind of Batman Forever with it in terms of like not being embarrassed of the comics. Like,
Right.
I just feel like Batman 89 was like, if that one hadn't worked, none of this would have happened. Or maybe it would have happened, but it would have taken a lot longer and it would not have unfolded the way it did.
Well, you know what I think would have happened? If we're going to play this game.
Sure,
I think
play it.
Okay, check it out. I think what would have really happened is if this gothic, beautiful, like, all the guns sound like rifles from the Old West type of, which was fixed in the 2K, by the way. All the guns sound
Or
like
the
fucking
4K
cannons.
is like
All the
they
guns
sound like they can
cannons.
level a small country.
Yeah, dude, it's like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers score touchdown every time they see Batman and starts shooting.
Instead of the old like, I'm in the Old West Bonanza.
Pew, pew, pew. Instead of that, but anyway, we're watching that, and I just feel like if this hadn't worked, I think we launch into a world where, like you were saying, the embarrassment. If this gothic, beautiful world that doesn't quite make sense and has its own flavor didn't quite work, I think the lesson, quote unquote, that they would have learned is to strip it down, and we would have gotten the Batman Begins times 10. I'm talking about Batman driving like a motorcycle. Batman drives in a Dodge Charger that's painted like the General Lee. Not like that, but
I think you would have got like Dolph Lundgren's Punisher, where
Right,
it's like
something
only in
so-
name only.
Yes,
Doesn't want to wear the actual.
Exactly, like ends up with a spray painted version of a bat that some kid gave him that he saved from a hooker or something. You know what I mean?
But I mean, like, imagine like at the time, like if this had failed, there'd be no business sense in making another comic book movie.
Dude,
I mean,
Selena Kyle's roommate at the brothel would have done the first design as like a screen print and given it to Bruce as like a t-shirt for him to wear around the house when he comes over, and then something would happen to brutalize them and he would put it on ironically and jump out a window to dudes up. That type of just gritty, quote unquote, goof realism
Right.
would have been, I think, what they graduated to if indeed this gothic, beautiful stuff that's very artful had failed.
But what's interesting that you say that is because it didn't fail, and because we got so many different versions of comic book movies. Like, if you look at the timeline between 1989 and where we are today, like, there's a lot of growing pains. There's a lot of different things. But it's interesting that you say, like, that's the version we would get, because now we've had so many options that's the version we are going to get. Like, I've read the script for the upcoming Joker movie, and it's like, that's what it is. Like,
Right.
This is like, the bare bones, like, will kind of allude to Joker, but not really the comic book. Like,
Yeah.
This is kind of its own thing. I feel like instead of that being a panic move, it's now a sign of we have so much variety that we are allowed to have
Right.
like
Latitude.
exactly.
Latitude. That's
Right.
a big one. Yeah, you're right. And that's a brilliant way to observe that. It's again, like you're talking about cycles. It comes back around to, like, once something becomes so entrenched, then we can start to play with the form again.
Right.
Because we've entrenched something so hard, which is why I believe that we're going to get this new wave of, since we've established what a superhero movie is and what a superhero situation is, now we're going to get more and more stuff like The Boys, where it's like taking the piss out of it, as it were.
Right.
And
then
yeah.
deconstructionalism will eventually become too
Like neo-classic.
tropey.
Yeah,
you know?
well, there'll be a turn to, and I'm telling you, when they do the neo-classic Superman movie with the CGI of 2028 or 2032 or something, and they get Alex Ross's head in a jar to do the concept art for the whole thing, dude, that movie, my friend, that's the one I'm looking forward to.
That's the one where it's like, we talk about like these movies not being embarrassed of the source material, we still haven't gotten there with Superman.
We really haven't.
And I'm hoping that we can, they can look over at Captain America and be like, you can do this earnestly and not be embarrassed by it. You know?
And you know what's really crazy? I would weird pitch time as far as these characters. I would love to see DC embrace the multiverse into like all the like the Darwin Cook type stuff. I know they've done stuff based on this stuff already. I'm just saying like that concept of like a story with Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman as we know them, but in World War II. Or 300 years in the future because something happened, they got thrown out of time or something. Right. These classic people we know, but in these situations where they just only have to be in that situation one time, and it doesn't have to harken back to something in a comic book. It can be this mashup of different aspects of each of their comics. You know what I mean?
Right. And now that you talk about it, it's like all these daydreams of what could be, and they don't seem that far-fetched anymore. Maybe not so much, but just to bring it all back, all of this would never have happened if Batman in 1989 had come out and it didn't work. And so, I want to get your final thoughts, as we start to wrap up here. But I think for me, Batman will always be, like I said, this dangerous but special, timeless, kind of weird. I've used it already, but I think the perfect way for me to explain how I feel about this movie is like, it's kind of a weird fever dream. It's like if I were Dorothy and I went to Oz, I think this would be like my Oz would be this movie, this like kind of nightmarish yet still enticing fly trap of a city, which is Gotham, and the fairy tale that's within it. I think that's what I need from a comic book movie for me to make a lasting appeal is, as much as I love the Nolan stuff and as much as I love, even look back at that first Iron Man, like it was very grounded. It was like, how can we make this appeal to people that they feel like this could happen to them?
Right.
And I think for me, like, that's what turns me off. I think that's what, like, in Justice League, I love it is because, like, it can't happen. Like, it is the fantasy. It is, like, the comic book. And I feel like Batman 89 perfectly encapsulates for me. It's just enough reality that I understand it, and it's just enough fantasy that it feels like it couldn't happen, but I like to live in this weird fever dream.
Right. I mean, I definitely know that I can't say it better than that. And I'll just say what it impacted on me as is, again, the thing about the swing, the thing about, I just really look back on the vision you'd have to hire a dude fresh off Pee-wee's Big Adventure to do this.
Had
he done Beetlejuice yet?
He had Beetlejuice.
So was it like in the can?
So he had done Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and that's where they're like, we should talk to the Tim Burton guy. And then they're like, I don't know. And then Beetlejuice crushed it, and they're like, all right, let's just go with him.
You know what I mean? Because I think I think his ability to show the mundane with enough of a sheen of fantasy, like you were just saying, I think that's what sold them. Because yes, you bought that they were chilling out around a table having a dinner, and then you also bought when sandworms are popping out and all the world turns into a giant moving dolly mural, stop motion takes over. You also buy that. So his ability to tread both of those worlds really sold them on him probably being able to go, okay, in the real world, Batman would get pulled over. They'd make a big giant blockade and stop him. He'd have to get out like a dumb asshole on the freaking the cop, like helicopter would shine down on Batman outside of his car, putting it down the jet. Can I turn my jet engine off, please? I'm just leave the jet engine on. You know what I mean? Like there'd be all this goofy crap in real life. So like, don't do a real enough world for that to happen. Don't do a real enough world where Vicky Vale can like recognize some road signs on her way to the goddamn, Batcave. Do it just enough where I believe that this gothic mythic character can be in danger, or that people he cares about could be in danger. And that these tropes, I mean, as you can see, I think they went with the most interesting choice every time in this movie. Whether it's from expediency or like people pushing that third act on Tim Burton or whatever, if you look at each of the scenes, they never went ever with, this would be the most logical way this could happen. Never once in that movie is anything the most
sometimes
logical.
To its detriment.
yeah, sometimes to its detriment, but I just think they swung every time for what's the most interesting way to introduce this piece of information, introduce this character, introduce this situation, introduce this basically this world as it relates to Batman and other characters. Every time they choose the most interesting thing. He hangs out with Commissioner Gordon in his house gambling and stuff, and he has big Bushido armor. For that time, that's probably the most interesting way to display Bruce Wayne's largesse, to display his wealth, is that, and how connected he is that he's the hub for all this type of jazz. And like you said, in the very beginning of the movie, they pan across Bruce Wayne's name while he's out kicking motherfuckers through doors who can't act, and holding people over stuff who can't act. While he's doing that scene, he was supposed to be at an event for Harvey Dent with the commissioner and stuff. So even in his civilian life, he's a crusader. But they knew, again, and I know this big long diatribe, but dig what I'm saying. They knew that was the most boring way to present him as that. So they just show the name. But he's away doing something. You know what I mean? They would never show a scene of him diligently with the commissioner and talking to him and stuff. That's not interesting. Every single time they go for the interesting thing over the logical thing. And that, to me, is the power of this movie, and the enduring, like, dopeness of it is they don't care. They're just going for interesting every time. No, he can't turn his head. They'll do backhands. The car's not maneuverable. It'll grapple around the corner. We'll do it live. You know what I mean? The bat signal's kind of dumb. We'll put it at the end. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Oh, the cape isn't moving in real life. Have Fleischer and Bakshi do the animation. The very first time you see him, he's a goddamn cartoon. It's just this spirit of, let's do it the most interesting way every time. Bruce Wayne. What's the most interesting way to be Bruce Wayne? Is it for him to blow in with girls on each arm? No. It's for him to come in and be like almost like a troll. Like, do you know who Bruce Wayne is? I mean, do you know which one of these guys is Bruce Wayne? Well, no. I'm not sure. And then, you know what I mean? This character, every time they take the most interesting approach.
It's Japanese. Oh, really? How do you know? Because I bought it in Japan. You know, like,
he's trying. The movie's kind of relentlessly interesting, and I think that's why it lasts.
Yeah, I think like some of the people we've talked about, they've gone on to different things, and some of them have passed away. But it's like, all I can really say at this point is like, thank you to Tim Burton and Sam Hamm and Bob Ringwood and Michael Uslan and all these people that brought this movie together. Because without this movie, well, my man cave would look a lot different.
Yeah, there'd be a bunch of more Indiana Jones, maybe.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know, because like even Batman was like tangentially a gateway into like movies and everything. Who knows what I would be into if it wasn't for this movie, you know?
Well, it definitely changed the culture, and I thank you for having me on to talk about this, because I didn't remember the video launch. I didn't remember a lot, and just having us watch it together just now, we noticed a lot of things about performance, things about how stagey it was, things about how inside it feels even when you're outside.
I mean they literally took over like a whole, like, basically an airstrip.
You know, it
built all that Gotham.
It feels like this is taking place in Dark City.
yes, definitely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know that's like an Inception type thing with the chicken and egg, but it's like, obviously that movie came before it. So like Dark City, the ripples go throughout time as far as production design and this 30s, 40s, 50s aesthetic. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, it's an enduring classic.
And that's what makes this, like, I think in another 30 years I'll still be able to talk about this movie, because it's still going to be as timeless then as it is now.
There's nobody on a Razor phone in this movie.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. But you don't think about it. You don't think like, man, why doesn't Batman just call her on his cell phone? Like, you're so invested into this world that you don't think about those things until maybe afterwards. But this movie is timeless. We are not. We are out of it. I want to thank you guys for listening. Thank you for hanging around while I took a little break, while I moved into this new place, but now I'm back. So coming up, I think I can tease a little bit. JTE, Mr. Movie Thanks Nye.
Woo!
I rarely do this. I like to give a little space between movies, but we're going to talk about one that just came out, which was Dark Phoenix, because I think it is neither as bad as people say it is or as good as its defenders say it is, but it's definitely worth talking about. Also, this one's going to be very strange. I am forcing Hector Navarro to watch the entire Mighty Ducks trilogy, because we will be talking about Mighty Ducks 3. And finally going to do that re-record. I've said it 5 times now, but I promise it's going to happen with Ken Knapsack. We're going to talk Rogue One. It's all coming up on the second half of Season 2, Hot Takes. Thank you, Mr. Ed Greer.
Thanks.
We only have one Bat movie left to talk about, because I've talked about Batman Returns. We've now talked about Batman 89. We've talked about Batman Forever. I think you, me, and Danielle Radford are going to have to do Batman and Robin eventually.
Oh, yeah. I'd love that. That would actually be pretty cool.
So stay tuned. More coming. Thank you so much for listening. And good piece of advice on the way out. Never rub another man's rhubarb.
Winged freak terrorizes. Wait till they get a load of me.